Welcome back to the Aspire Lead podcast. If you've seen on the feed, I've always got Mitch Weathers coming out, the creator of Organized Binder. He's also the author of, can I say best-selling book? Because I feel like you just keep selling phenomenal copies of this. Executive Functioning for Every Classroom, Creating Safe and Predictable Learning Environments. And this is a book that we've talked about each month as we're going through a very important topic of executive functioning. And Mitch, last time we talked about goal setting and threw it out there that we're going to continue this conversation this month, as it's kind of a big topic, one that I think folks try to do in the classroom, maybe miss the mark, or maybe have some traditional practices. And that's kind of where we started the conversation last month. And this time I would like to touch on something that's at the end of the chapter, but also something that's overarching throughout your book. And I think it's something that I would love to kind of key in on in regards to why you have this specific. But before we do that, I'd love for you, Mitch, just to talk through the self-regulation through goal setting piece in the chapter on goal setting in chapter 8.
Yeah, specifically. Yeah, if you go back to, and if you haven't listened to the previous episode where we unpack goal setting, which I think can be well-intentioned, but often your point, Josh, just like kind of miss the mark or get a little bit convoluted. And we want to bring like absolute clarity and also simplicity to the process. And so in that, when we were chatting, I used the word singular. And it really, ideally, you kind of have this overarching goal, not kind of, you do, a very clear goal, and then figuring out a path towards that goal. And I think the key there is this daily, in Organized Binder, and I talk about it in the book, identifying a daily task for a specific amount of time. And then all stakeholders and caregivers and support providers, everyone who's trying to help this young person be successful, can remind them of that daily task, hold them accountable, help them with it. But it makes it like, okay, here's something I can do today. And if I'm consistent with that over time, then I'm more likely to achieve this goal. And the reason I bring that up in light of self-regulation, having a goal. Now, if a student who is struggling with self-regulated learning, setting a meaningful goal, a very clear but meaningful goal in light of that, so that their daily action item is going to help them practice self-regulated learning in whatever the environment is. We'll just say the classroom at this point. Then you make the goal that much more meaningful, and you give them the opportunity. And it really is this opportunity, like, okay, every day in class for this set amount of time, am I going to do this thing or not? Because it is an action item. This isn't, the daily task is not meant to be something I'm like thinking about and lofty goals. It's like, it's very clear. It's very binary. Do it or don't, ideally. And that tension, I think, is a good thing. And there's a phrase I know you're familiar with called desirable difficulty. And that can be applied throughout all teaching and learning. But there's a part of that when it comes to self-regulated learning or self-regulation in the classroom with this daily task is too easy, not going to have me self-regulate. I'm not going to have that tension. Too difficult, I'm going to fail every time. And so figuring that out, which comes all the way back to, and we're going to talk about listening, knowing who's in the room. And the more we can understand and know students, then the more likely we are to be able to help them set meaningful goals that would give them practice with over time self-regulation.
Mitch, let's talk about the component, because the way that you have the book set up, every chapter has self-regulation piece to it within that chapter. So why was that so important for you, and how does self-regulation attach itself to executive functioning?
Yeah, that's a good question, Josh. If you're listening in and you haven't read my book, you'll see that there's 6 skills and habits, these executive functioning skills that for the most part, each get their own chapter. Working memory ends up with 2 chapters. And in writing the book and just thinking through it, it made a lot more sense to me to not have self-regulation have its own chapter, because it's part of every step, every other chapter. And that we got to kind of back up and look at the 3 keys for equipping students with executive functioning skills that I outline as clarity, modeling, and routine. And so each chapter, like we can even just talk about routine. If a teacher or a school or a district collectively implements and kind of commits to with fidelity a predictable rhythm to the day, a predictable routine. Well, if it's clear, if there's clarity around that, will you provide students daily opportunities for self-regulated learning? Because again, there's back to that tension. Do I engage and participate in the routine or do I not? And I think that, again, back to that kind of, I'll use the word tension. That's an opportunity for students. And do I persist in that routine throughout the class period or over time? Like all of those little bits encourage self-regulation. But the clarity and the consistency is important. And so when each chapter, as you know, in the book is a kind of a step in this routine. And when we, for example, the second step in the routine, the skill that's being practiced is planning and time management, right? AKA, how do I keep a calendar? Well, if I bring clarity around that, one, am I going to participate in the second step of the routine when we're going over this and we're updating our calendar? And then the other side of that is once I've made clear what we're going to do today, and if there's next steps or homework outside of school, or if there's something that's due at the end of the week, once again, I'm providing now outside of school. Am I going to do that or not? Like, I can't tell you how many times trying to help my children, my personal children, with what they think is their homework. But I'm like, what actually is the homework? And where's the stuff that I can help you with the homework? And there's a lack of clarity at times. And when we bring in ambiguity for students who are struggling with self-regulation, it's not a good combo. But when we bring in clarity, then that, and I will use the word accountability, becomes a real thing because, and I mean it in a supporting way, not I'm going to hold you accountable, but like, I'm going to hold you accountable. And that's just where that clarity piece has to be. And it's the same when we look at organization. For us, it's the third step of the routine. Every day we're practicing and modeling organization. Well, if I clearly have a class model or sample of what your portfolio needs to look like or your binder needs to look like, now I can, same thing. Am I going to maintain my binder every day? Because it's the tool as we're going through this routine. Because I can see every day exactly what mine needs to look like. Am I going to engage and do that or am I not? So all of these pieces, just by virtue of clarity, routine, and modeling, give students daily opportunity with self-regulated learning. So it's kind of woven into the fabric of the routine.
Yeah. No, I think it's beautiful. And I think as far as regulation goes, I think that's something that a lot of educators just miss, that there's a lot of verbal and nonverbal ways to see that a student is not regulated. And obviously that's going to affect their learning. It's going to affect their behavior. It's going to affect how they feel about the class, about school. And I love that you've connected that piece to executive functioning. In regards to that, though, are there some steps that you have talked through in regards to, how to teach students how to regulate themselves when they maybe aren't feeling like they have routine or power in the classroom, or the sensory is just overload? There's a lot of ways that kids can get dysregulated. So are there things and strategies that you help teachers with in regards to that?
Absolutely. Starting with clearly implementing a routine that students understand, they can see, and it's possible. Like the routine can't be so, back to desirable difficulty, so like arduous that it's like, no, I'm just talking about very simple steps in a routine that gives some structure to the lesson, right? Or the school day. So that's always a starting place. Like when I have conversations with teachers, for example, I was sitting in a classroom, not an organized binder thing, not related to my professional life at all, my personal life, but I'm not going to say any names or anything.
Sure.
But the teacher who I was listening to at a back to school night, which was 4 weeks into the school year, was talking about their binder system. And they, some young person in my family made me swear before I went on campus that I am not the organized binder guy and you're not the executive functioning guy. You're just a parent. So I'm just sitting in the room quietly. And this new teacher was really excited and said, I have a binder system I'm going to roll out. and I'm like, oh my gosh, cool. She looks over at me and then points to the back corner of the classroom. And there's literally like 150 binders that this teacher had purchased themselves, just haphazardly piled up on this table. And I just thought, oh, like, it's well-intentioned, but the ambiguity there for the student, like, when are you going to get organized? And here we are in week 4. And I don't mean this to be judgmental, but it's for students who are struggling with self-regulation. That's that ambiguity piece. And that's just one example. And so bringing about the clarity through routine, like, here's our steps in our routine. Here's this is where we put our stuff. We get organized. That could be in a first grade classroom. You walk in and here's my cubby, and just being very mindful about routine. That's always kind of the starting place. And then, another layer to my book is I really believe that this executive functioning development is meant to be tier 1 work for all kids in all classrooms. And if we do that, and we have things in place that are helping students regulate, if there's a persistent issue beyond that, then we have a more authentic tier 2 intervention or concern. And that concern might be, you have too much crap all over the walls in this classroom that it's just distracting. I mean, you've been in rooms like that, right?
My classroom used to be like that.
Oh man. So I don't know if I was just lazy or what, but my years in the classroom, it was like sterile. And I realize now, although that may have kind of looked boring, and it was always a science class, so it kind of goes with the thing. But the research is pretty clear, right? If there's too much stuff all over the walls, right? And then you have to be strategic about what you have on the wall, because after a little while, if it's not updated or moved, or if it's not part of, and I write about this in the book, if it's not part of the fabric of what we do, you literally stop seeing it. Students, I forget the term right now, but so the neat thing about that is, once this routine and this modeling, once that's all in place and super clear, if a student's still struggling to kind of self-regulate, it's those next conversations, which I'm just going to refer to as tier 2, that it might be like, for me, I had some students over the years where it was very clear that Joshua Stamper, who was in my second period class, needed a job, because Josh just needed to get up and move around a little bit more. Not that we weren't doing that. Again, a ninth grade science teacher, I could incorporate that. But again, that's kind of tier 2. And instead of it being shame, it was like, oh, this kid just needs to move. Or maybe that chair, maybe that lab where you're sitting isn't the right setup for you. And maybe, so there's ways to get, and again, this is knowing the kids in the room, but they're really fun interventions and figuring out a way privately to say, like, hey, I'm not expecting you to stay in perfectly aligned rows and never move for these 60 minutes or these 2 hours or whatever, of course. But I'm noticing this. So what can we do? And then make those adjustments. But I don't think it's even, if there's kind of chaos or a lack of routine, students who are struggling with self-regulation are going to struggle that much more. So,
yeah. I'm glad that you're not the only one that gets the speech about, you're not an administrator, you're not an educator.
Yeah.
You are going in as a parent, because I've gotten that so many times over the years.
So you figured out who I was talking about, right? It's my daughter who started high school this year, and it was, yeah, I found myself, well, there's a lot to be said there, but I was like, oh, can I just talk to you for 5 minutes after class? I think I have some suggestions that'll help. And she was, nope. Just walked out.
Funny. Yep. No, but those are good examples. And I think, I was joking, but it's true. Like, I was an art teacher, so it does connect. It was connected to my subject matter, but I had kids doing murals on the walls, and I had projects on my ceiling. I had it. Like, I remember parents coming into my classroom and just being like, whoa, like literally their whole body just was like, it was just a jolt
experience.
Yeah. And for me, I loved it. It was creative. And, I felt like the kids had ownership in, the way the room looked, and it transformed over each year too. So there was kind of a point to it, but at the same point, like, I know it probably for some kids did not regulate them because it was just manic. I mean, it was just crazy. So I think that probably maybe enhanced your behavior. Now looking back, and I was a young teacher, so, it was fun for me, but at the same time, I don't know if it helped in regards to routines and some of the things that we're talking about today. But I guess, as you get older and you get more experience, you get to learn through that. And that's what this podcast is all about, is helping those in the classroom, helping administrators go in and do what you do every day, Mitch, with going and helping different campuses and districts to be able to see where those areas of growth are and to help them through that. And so for those who are listening, I've been putting up the website for Mitch as he's supporting schools all over the country, traveling, and you can go to organizedbinder.com. Mitch, I know that you have webinars going on all the time. Do you have anything coming up?
Yes, we do. We just did one, I think it was last week with Corwin. That was really fun. You can go to the website. It's December 11th, 3 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern. And again, December 11th, that's a Wednesday, 3 p.m. Pacific. Easiest way to sign up, go to the website. If you're not on our mailing list, we sent a blast out last week. We'll probably send another one. Go to any of the social handles. It's there. If you're on Instagram, I think that was our latest post. But sign up. It's free. They're fun. Lots of value to share with everybody, I think. So come on over.
Awesome. Well, before at the beginning, I had the book up. So if you haven't got a copy, make sure you do so. Executive Functioning for Every Classroom. And if you want an easy way, it'll be in the show notes, also over at joshstamper.com. You just click the link. It'll send you over to purchase that wonderful resource. And then for those who are watching on YouTube, I appreciate you viewing the video. Make sure that you like and subscribe, as that's a growing community there. And if you're on the podcast platforms, feel free to, throw in a 5-star review. Love those as always. And if you haven't checked out Mitch's work before on the podcast, we've gotten a bunch of episodes. Like I said, we do this monthly as a bonus episode where we're talking about executive functioning. So if this is the first time that you've kind of tuned into this episode and this conversation, feel free to go back, as we really started from the beginning of the book and we're trying to work through that. Mitch, I was thinking about it as you're talking. You had mentioned the word accountability multiple times, and I don't think we've really touched on that in our conversations. And so for the next time, I'd love to,
that'd be good.
Really kind of work through that topic as it pertains to executive functioning and see where that conversation goes too.
I'd love that. Let's do it.
All right, Mitch, you had talked about social media and Instagram. What are your handles for folks to be able to follow your work?
At Organized Binder on most. That's Instagram, X, or Twitter, and Facebook. And then on LinkedIn, which is probably where, if I had to say where I'm most active, it's just look up my name, Mitch Weathers. There's an Organized Binder page there too. But
sure. You haven't done Blue Sky or Threads or anything new?
Don't even know what Blue Sky is.
Buddy, come on.
I know what Threads is, but I'm not going to go. I'm actually trying to figure out which ones I'm going to pull off of.
Yeah, I understand that.
I'm
excited because for folks, if you're on Blue Sky, I've got my handle. It's at Joshua Stamper. So I actually got my name.
Is that
I always have to do? It's very similar to Twitter. Honestly, it feels like the old Twitter.
Oh, so somebody's coming in. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it was created by the same person that created Twitter. He's no longer with Blue Sky, but he was part of that starting group. And yeah, I think a lot of people are starting to head over there. Yeah.
It's a non-Elon Twitter.
Yes. It's actually pretty fun. So if anyone's on Blue Sky that's listening, jump on and give me a follow. I'm actually at Joshua Stamper. There's no double underscore. I don't have to be all fancy with it. I can just use my name. Yeah. Stoked about it. All right. Well, enough of that. Mitch, as always, it's great to see you. It's great to have this conversation and can't wait for next month.
Me too, man. Thanks for having me.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at teachbetter.com/podcasts, and we'll see you at the next episode.